Hey, Trip Zero here, and I'm going to do a little bit something different with a whiteboard. This is a companion video to my blog on tripzero.io. So check out the blog. It's got more in-depth math and more explanation, but this is kind of an introduction to the topic. And then I'm going to go out and do some real-life experimentation in my own greenhouse with this concept. And the concept is maximizing CO2, which is growth, CO2 consumption, which is growth, and in the greenhouse by playing with the light levels. Or determining growth by CO2 level, either or. So let's get started. So the basics of photosynthesis, everybody knows. You have a plant and light hits it. Some of it doesn't hit it. And if it's the right type of photon, if it's the right wavelength or energy level, it will hit. It will be absorbed by the plant, and it will take some CO2 out of the air and some H2O from the ground, and it will convert that into some sugar, some plant sugar, some glucose molecules. And then it uses that to build all its cell structures, use it to build fruit and flowers. All the parts of the plant are going to use these sugar molecules to do that. So I wondered, how much light does my plant really use? And all the math's on the website, so look there, but the gist of it is per gram of CO2, the plant needs 24,741 joules per gram of CO2. And let's imagine your plant has a certain CO2 consumption rate per unit area. I searched on the web, 2.4 grams seems like a pretty good number for CO2 consumption. So that's 2.4 grams per hour per meter squared of CO2. We can plug that in and see how much energy we need to support that kind of CO2 consumption, to support that kind of growth. And it comes out to about 57.6 kilojoules, which are per hour, and which is about 16 watts, or joules per second. So this number divided by 3,600, there's 3,600 seconds in an hour, and you get 16 joules per second, or 16 watts per meter squared. That's all your plant needs. If every single one of those photons that are represented by that energy hits the plant and they're all used, that's all the plant needs. It doesn't need any more. So of course, not every photon is going to hit the plant. Some of it's going to miss. Some of it's not going to be a usable photon. Maybe it's a green photon. It's just going to bounce off. So came up with a calculator. Link to it's on the blog, where you can plug in. My plant's only going to get 20% of the photons because it's this big. Like, imagine this is your area. Here's your light source. And maybe your plant's only this big. So you can estimate, this is only 20% of the photons are going to hit the plant. And then you can plug in your light efficiency too. Maybe your lights are LEDs and they're 60% efficient, or maybe they're incandescent lights and they're like 10% efficient, or CFLs, different kinds of fluorescent technology. So you can plug in that efficiency, you can plug in your canopy or your area of actual plant, and you can estimate how much light you're going to need based on this number right here. So move on real quick. There's a lot of, we'll try to make this under 10 minutes. So there's some cool things we can do. Look, we want to maximize CO2, we want to maximize growth. So what we need to do is calculate how much our plants are consuming. So we need a CO2 sensor, we need a CO2 generator. Let's say we use the CO2 generator, raise it up to 2,000 parts per million. If you know the area of your greenhouse, your cubic area, you can calculate how many grams that is. I'm not going to work in grams right now. I'm not going to do the math, but then 10 minutes later, time equals 10 minutes, you take another reading. Say it's 1700. That's my consumption rate. If in a perfect situation where there's no leakage with the outside world, if there's leakage, you're going to have to know your leakage rate. How much of that air is being mixed with the outside world. So in an empty room or an empty greenhouse, get a number. Take it up to 2,000. Wait 10 minutes to get another reading from your CO2 sensor. And let's say our leakage rate is 3,000 or 300 parts per million. That's our leakage rate. So when we get plants in there, maybe we do the same thing. We wait 10 minutes and it's 1,600. The difference between this is going to be actually 100, right? So this right here is 300. Here to here it's 100. 100 is our actual plant consumption rate. And then we can do some pretty cool things with that over 10 minutes. Convert that to hours or seconds, however you want to read it. But we can maximize our CO2 growth based on that, once we know our consumption rate. So for example, let's say I have my lights on at 50%. That's how much my light intensity, right? 50% on, it's not fully on. And my CO2 consumption rate's 1.2 grams per hour per meter squared. What happens, we can do a perturb and observe type algorithm to determine if we're giving enough light, or if we need more light, if we need less light. So let's increase it to 60. 60%. And then let's take another CO2 reading. Right? Maybe it goes to 1.3. And we know if everything else stayed the same, which is hard to determine, but if we can estimate or take a guess that we are using more light, we need more light. Our plants are not getting enough light. We can maximize, we can get more growth if we add 10%. And let's see we add another 10%. And it stayed the same. Then we know, if everything else stayed the same, that our plants are saturated. They're using all the photons and they don't need any more. We can turn our light back down to the previous level and save energy. So there's a lot of things we can, on my blog I go over the PID algorithm, how we could possibly use the PID algorithm for that. In the next 2 minutes, roughly works like this. You set a set point. Let's say you think 2.4 grams per hour per meter squared is the ideal consumption rate. You set that as your set point. And what the PID algorithm will do is it'll start at 0% for your lights, and it'll slowly ramp it up and up and up and up until it hits this, and it'll kind of just stay there. Right? In a greenhouse type situation where you have sun coming in, maybe the sun's giving it all it needs, so the PID algorithm will be down here. It'll be like, hey, we're getting 2.4 with basically no light, no artificial light, no supplemental light. So it'll try and find the ideal rate to maximize CO2 consumption. So that's pretty much it. There's a lot of things you can potentially automate with this. You can do light levels, you can do temperature levels, and try and see if, by adjusting the temperature, did my CO2 rate change at all? My watering rates, the amount I water per time, my nutrient levels, all these things we can potentially automate by trying to maximize CO2 consumption, just using this simple PID algorithm. So I'm going to start doing some experiments in my own greenhouse. So this is the beginning of the series. This is kind of like the introduction. So I hope this is helpful, and stay tuned for more in this series, maximizing growth and automation. Trip 0 out.